morning.
Good morning.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Jascott. I am an advanced lay servant, and I have been a member here at Broad Street for about 27 years. When I was trying to figure that out, it seemed that was a really long time. I did not realize it was that long. Like many of you, I'm involved in many things here at the church. I sing in the choir, I teach Sunday school, I chair the worship committee, I'm a lay delegate to the annual conference, and I've been an active member of a Methodist church since I was a small child. I grew up on the other side of New Jersey, over near Asbury Park, and I attended the First United Methodist Church of Oakhurst, right around the corner from my house. My mom still attends there and is active in that congregation. So I'm going to start this morning by asking you to participate. Help me fill in the blanks. You're in good hands with Allstate. Okay. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. All right. And last but not least, somebody is on your side. Who would that be? Nationwide. Okay. These are great slogans. I know that because so many of you were able to fill in the blanks with the company name. These are slogans obviously from insurance companies, and we hear them so many times on the radio and on television. The idea behind advertising is to make an impression on potential customers so that when the purchaser is ready to purchase a product, they will remember that particular company's name and buy that product. Think about those three slogans for a minute. You're in good hands with Allstate. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And Nationwide is on your side. All of these project very comforting words. You are not alone. Don't worry. Things will be okay. And we will take care of any problems you have. Now, insurance is a pretty interesting thing. How many people think that? I have to think it, I have to say it. I work for an insurance company. I don't happen to work for any of those three that we just had slogans for. I work for Aetna. I am an underwriting manager there, and basically that means I'm a math geek. And I manage a number of people who set rates for employer policies for medical insurance. And our current slogan is, Aetna, you don't join us, we join you, right? I'm glad some of you know that. It's relatively new. It just came out. I'm pretty impressed. So in other words, Aetna is going to meet you where you are. You don't have to go out of your way. We're going to make things easier for you. I've been with Aetna for about 19 years, and prior to that I worked for Prudential. What did they like to be known as? The Rock. Okay. Translated, rely on us and we'll take care of your problems. We are the Rock. We sang that song a couple of weeks ago. The wise man built his house upon the rock. So these insurance companies are kind of sticking with biblical themes here, right? Good neighbors, they're the rock. Okay, so insurance is a guarantee against loss by one party to another. That loss can take many forms. It can be the loss of life. It can be the loss of home. It can be the loss of health, the loss of property. It can be property damage. An insurance policy is protection against significant loss from an event that might happen. You cannot buy insurance against the loss of a pencil, right? That won't cause anybody any significant loss. But those other things that I mentioned. And it's an event that might happen. In the Bible, we have something even better than an insurance policy. We have assurance. An assurance policy is protection against an event that is definite. Assurance has an element of certainty. It is a much stronger word than insurance. Assurance is security. It is something that inspires confidence and certainty. Merriam-Webster defines assurance as a strong and definite statement that something will happen or that something is true. Now, Peggy read for us this morning from chapter 7 in the book of Revelation. Revelation itself is a letter to the 7 churches in the Roman province of Asia, and the title of the book comes from the Greek word for apocalypse and basically means the revealing of divine mysteries. John wrote down what was revealed to him about what was to come and sent it to these 7 churches. Some of those churches had issues that John sought to correct by warning them about what he saw. But other parts of the book, including what Peggy read this morning, give us a wonderful glimpse into what will be the assurance that we will live with Jesus in heaven forever, and that heaven is a place we definitely want to be. No more suffering, no more sadness, but rather shelter in the Lord. Let's listen to verses 15 through 17 again. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Do those last 2 lines remind you of anywhere else in the Bible? He will lead them to springs of living water. Sound familiar? The 23rd Psalm. Judy's got it. Okay, we've got a lot of audience participation today. So, if you would, if there are pew Bibles, take them out. I don't know that we have very many pew Bibles. How many people know the 23rd Psalm? Most of you? Okay. Let's say the 23rd Psalm together. I learned the King James Version. So, if you know that one, say that one. But it doesn't matter which version you want to say. Let's say the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the assurance that we look for. The assurance we have come to expect from our relationship with Christ. These short 6 verses are so comforting that even when those of us who took communion to folks in the Alzheimer's wing of the Masonic home asked people there to recite, they didn't know who we were. They didn't know why we were there. They had no idea what communion was. But darn if they didn't know that 23rd Psalm word for word. They could say every word of that 23rd Psalm. It helped them be comforted. The 23rd Psalm, our gospel lesson that Marcia read for us this morning, and the reading from Revelation from Peggy read, all refer to the Lord as a shepherd. You're probably wondering, why is the title of this sermon Counting Sheep? I am actually going to get to sheep. Sheep held an important place in the economy of Israel in biblical times. They provided meat, they provided wool for clothing, and a family's economic standing was determined in a large part by the number of livestock that they owned. Livestock including cattle and goats in addition to the sheep. The sheep were an integral part of the lives of the Jews, and the shepherds who guarded them had a very important job. In our gospel lesson today, Jesus indicated to the Jews that he was the true shepherd of Israel who cared for the people and their spiritual welfare. So let's talk about sheep. Of all domesticated animals, sheep are the most helpless. They have no homing instinct or homing mechanism. They wander around grazing all day with their heads down. They never look up. So they get lost, and they cannot find their way home. It's not a derogatory statement about sheep, it's just factual. They can't find their way home. If they're standing at the door, they don't know to go in. They just don't know where they are. If sheep fall into moving water, they will drown. But sheep do fear moving water. They'll follow anybody anywhere, but they do fear moving water. And they will not drink from any stream or lake unless the water is perfectly still. This is why David in the 23rd Psalm tells us of the shepherd who makes us lie down in green pastures waters and leads us beside still waters. The water has to be still for the sheep to be able to get a drink. Sheep are totally dependent on the shepherd who tends them with care and compassion. Shepherds were the providers, the guides, the protectors, and the constant companions of the sheep. So close is the bond between shepherd and sheep that even today, Middle Eastern shepherds can divide flocks that have mingled at a well or during the night simply by calling their sheep. Now, during the day, the shepherd would lead the sheep to a safe place to graze and make them lie down in a shady place for several hours. Then at night, the shepherd would lead the sheep to the protection of a sheepfold. If you look on the front cover of your bulletin, there's a picture of a sheepfold. It's a large circular enclosure with high stone walls, and the sheep were housed there at night to protect them from wild animals and thieves. In a village, most families would each have their own flock of sheep, and they would be out in the fields grazing, but at night they would all come back to the town sheepfold. There was only one doorway into the sheepfold, and it was guarded by a porter or doorkeeper. The porter would take charge of the sheep and protect them by lying down in the doorway. Robbers could not get in, and the sheep could not get out. The porter would defend the sheep in his charge with his very life and literally become the door for the sheep. A few verses before what Marcia read today, in John 10:7, Jesus refers to himself as the door. In the morning, when the shepherds would arrive, they would go to the entrance of the sheepfold, and they would call their sheep. The porter knew each shepherd, and he would give them access to the sheep via the door. And although there were several families with sheep in the enclosure, the sheep heard the voice of their shepherd calling, and they would separate from the other sheep and follow their particular shepherd. They didn't get confused. They knew their shepherd would protect them. Each sheep instinctively knew its shepherd by his voice, and they would only respond to their owners. The sheep trusted their shepherd. They knew the shepherd would protect them. If a lion or wolf came to attack the sheep in the field, the shepherd would put himself between the threat and his sheep. He would be willing to lay down his life to protect those sheep, just as Jesus did for us on the cross. In our gospel lesson today, when Jesus told the crowd of non-believers that my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. He was referring to the imagery of himself as the shepherd, standing at the door of the sheepfold, calling to his sheep. Those who know his voice follow him and trust him, assured that he will take care of them. We sang a couple of songs this morning that I felt kind of fit into this theme, and the first was My Hope is Built. And we sang his oath, his covenant, his blood, support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay, and on Christ, the solid rock, I stand. Now there is a verse in that song that isn't often included in our hymnal, and that verse reads as follows: I trust his righteous character, his counsel, promise, and his power, his honor and his name's at stake to save me from the burning lake. That hymn was written by Edward Mote, and the chorus came to him while he was on his way to work. Not surprising, he was a carpenter by trade, but he gave that up to become a pastor later in life. The second hymn we sang, also to do with assurance, is Because He Lives, written by Bill and Gloria Gaither. Gloria shared the background of the hymn as follows. When Bill and I started our family in the 60s, racial tensions were tearing the country apart, not unlike today. Civil rights activists had suffered, and some had been killed. The Vietnam conflict was claiming thousands of lives, and tensions boiled over on university campuses. Many young people were growing disillusioned and dropping out. In this climate, Bill and I sought to write songs with lasting answers to the turmoil of the human spirit. She went on to say that when she unexpectedly found herself pregnant again shortly after having a baby, and at the same time Bill became sick, they questioned things. And she wrote, this combination of national turmoil and personal trouble discouraged us, and we occasionally finally asked each other, if the world is like this now, what will it be in 15 or 16 years from now for our baby? What will this child face? While pondering and praying about these things, we came to realize anew that our courage doesn't come from a stable world, for the world has never been stable. Jesus himself was born in the cruelest of times. No, we have babies, raise families, and risk living because the resurrection is true. And their song, that second verse, but greater still, the calm assurance, the word assurance. This child can face uncertain days because he lives. The last hymn we're going to sing this morning is, of course, Blessed Assurance. Fanny Crosby wrote the hymn in 1873, and she was a prolific hymn writer. She wrote over 8,000 poems and hymns, and Blessed Assurance came to her while visiting her friend Phoebe, who wanted to play for Fanny a song she had just written. After hearing it, Fanny exclaimed, "Why, that says Blessed Assurance." And she proceeded to write the other verses. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Fanny Crosby was blind from the time she was a baby, attributed by some to medical malpractice, but she never regretted being blind. And she has even been quoted as saying that had she been able to see, it was unlikely she would have been able to write as many hymns as she did. I love to sing. I love the words of some of these hymns that we've sung today, and I appreciate the hymn composers who can put so beautifully to music the words that capture the promises in the Bible, the assurance that we are saved from our sins by Jesus' death and resurrection, and that we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Please turn to number 369 and we'll sing Blessed Assurance.